Do you want to learn the secrets of accessing growth capital? This episode of Uncharted Entrepreneurship is brought to you by EO Minnesota and Content Basis' new Shopify blog program. Our guest today is Patrick Donohue, CEO and co-founder of Hill Capital Corporation. Patrick has over 30 years of experience in the world of finance and a passion for understanding what drives business value. In this episode, Patrick shares his insights on why finance is so challenging for entrepreneurs and how his book, Breakout Valuation, aims to demystify the process of creating value and accessing capital. Patrick discusses the importance of having a magnetic vision that attracts stakeholders to your business. He also opens up about his journey serving as president of EO Minnesota and the lessons in leadership he gained from working with a diverse group of entrepreneurial visionaries. If you're an entrepreneur looking to build value in your business and want to understand how to leverage finance to achieve your goals, you won't want to miss Patrick Donohue's practical and hard-won insights. Stay tuned. Welcome to Uncharted Entrepreneurship, your front row seat to daring stories from the boldest business trailblazers forging new paths across industries. I'm your host, Brent Peterson, armed with inside access, sitting down with partners, founders, and CEOs in the entrepreneurial world. Let's explore. Welcome to this episode of Uncharted Entrepreneurship. Today I have Patrick Donohue. Patrick is the CEO, co-founder of Hill Capital. I hope I got all those right. Patrick, go ahead, do an introduction for yourself. Tell us your day-to-day role and one of your passions in life.
Excellent. Well, great to see you, Brent. I appreciate all the work that you do for entrepreneurs. So it's wonderful to be with you today. My background is really all around finance. And so early on, I actually, as a little kid, sold lemonade with my cousin Chad. So started with that. But everything evolved in and around finance. So I always have been fascinated with money, how it moves, why things are valued the way they are. And so there's a lot about me on LinkedIn and so on and so forth. But the thread is I've always enjoyed understanding what builds value for businesses and why products are priced the way they are. So that's the common theme. And so that speaks to my passion and my interests in what I do day to day as for Hill Capital. And with Hill Capital, we invest in businesses. So we're investing $500,000 to $1 million directly in growing founder-led small businesses.
And you do have personal passions as well outside of business, right?
Very much so, yeah. So I do love to downhill ski. I actually teach skiing. So the last several years, I've skied over 50 days, mostly at Buck Hill, Minnesota, but also a number of days in the mountains. And then in the summer, I'm an avid water skier and just spend a lot of time in the water, whether paddleboarding or fishing or whatever.
That's awesome. And for people that aren't familiar, for all of our listeners, Minnesota is actually a great place to learn downhill skiing.
It is.
Hard to believe, but tell us why.
Yeah, well, I tell people Buck Hill in Minnesota is one of the best places in the world to learn. So actually some of the best world-class skiers like Lindsey Vonn learned right here in Minnesota and specifically at Buck Hill. And there's a number of reasons for it, but it's just very approachable. It's easy. The runs are shorter, and we have what they call magic carpet, so people can shuffle up and stand on it and pulls people right up. When you're in the mountains, you just have much less of that, if any of that at all. And so it's a wonderful environment for people to be able to learn the wonderful sport of downhill skiing.
Great. Perfect. So before we get into content, and we're going to talk about breaking out, maybe some valuation about breaking out or break out some evaluation. I'm coming up with some different aspects of what we're going to talk about today. And Jack Daly, I think, is another good topic. But
yes,
you have volunteered to be part of the Free Joke Project. I'm going to tell you a joke, and all
right.
you have to do is say, give a rating for the joke, 1 through 5.
Okay.
And some people have given a rating of 1 through 10, and they've given it a 4. Out of 10.
So you just cut it down to a 5. So yes. that is the great that's a great thing to do.
I'm gonna round up no matter what.
Now over my shoulder, it might be a little reflective there, but you see my sign, it says dad jokes told here. So
all right. We're in the right room.
So let's do this.
All right. Here we go. I asked my venture capitalists when we would get funded. They said March 1st. So I walked around the office a bit.
Whew. It's definitely not a dad joke. So, on a dad joke scale, it'd be pretty low because most kids wouldn't, that'd be a little tough for them. But I'll give it a, I'll give it a, I'll give it a 4. That
All
was
right.
good.
It's an
Especially,
EO dad
especially for
joke.
me, I might have to tell that joke as a venture capitalist. So that
There
was
you
good,
go.
Brent. So,
All right. And I understand you have one for me. Go ahead.
so I've got one for you. So, do you know what Beethoven is doing in his grave?
No.
Well, he's decomposing.
All right. I should have seen that one coming.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, your delivery was much better than mine too. I've
Well,
kind of screwed up my delivery at the end. Anyways, let's get started.
well,
So,
you need to rate the joke, Brent.
oh, I'm sorry. Jeez, I'm going to give that a 5. I love
Okay,
that one. That's a great
awesome.
one.
So
I'm
my
going to
daughter
reuse
told
it.
me that one the other week, so I'll give credit to Brooke.
Thank you, Brooke. All right. Give us a little bit of background, how you got interested in what you're doing, and kind of that journey through your funding.
Yeah, I have always been interested in why things are valued the way they are. And my career started early on in a typical, what they call a Wall Street job. I wrote research on publicly held companies, then I flipped into investment banking, helped them raise money. And the reason I share some of that background and context is because it really started to bug me how disconnected Wall Street was from Main Street and how small companies really had a hard time raising capital and being able to build and grow. And so that was really the impetus to help me start and found Hill Capital Corporation as a way to help companies think through and to get better at being able to raise money, access money as an investor. And so a lot of those things are the issues that I think through on a daily basis is why finance is so hard for entrepreneurs and how to really help level set. And it's a big reason why I wrote the book, Breakout Valuation, is to help entrepreneurs think about how to access capital and utilize finance to their advantage to build value.
Yeah, talking about just accessing capital. Is there sort of a minimum threshold that a business would look at before they look at getting a venture capital funding or angel investor or something like that?
Yeah, and it ebbs and flows, and everybody has various opinions. But the big picture these days, if somebody's looking for venture capital, traditional venture capital, they're probably having to raise a minimum of $5 million and might one be able to say three. But the real institutional venture capital are running very, very large funds. And so they need to really write big checks. And so traditional VC, that's where the model is broken down because it's gotten so big. Now, angel investors have gotten a lot more, have been able to pool together a lot more money. So, like Angel List and some of the angel groups and so forth, they're able to pull together a few $100,000, and so that can work as well. The one thing I would recommend for entrepreneurs is to really think through what they're looking to accomplish long term, what I call magnetic vision is, where they want to go, and to think through how much money that might actually take. Now, if it does take, 10, 50, 100 plus $1 million, then it's definitely a traditional venture capital route. And they should start those conversations as soon as they can, even if it's in the early stages and they only need a few $100,000. So a lot of it really depends on the long-term vision of that founder and what they're looking to achieve is where I would help point them to the conversations that they should start immediately for capital.
And I think the entrepreneur founder would expect to give up a little bit of control in their company as well then when they're bringing on some funding.
Correct. And I love that you brought that up, Brent, because that is a really critical question early on when a founder does have control, when it might be just a handful of people. Now, if a founder, group of founders wants to be able to build this business and, own and control it for 10 or 20 years, then venture capital is not the right route for them. Venture capital and even to a larger degree, angel capital, they're going to start to lose control. And that's just the reality of selling stock because stock with it comes voting rights, and they'll request board seats and being able to have oversight in the business. So I always encourage entrepreneurs, the founders, to really think through what they want to accomplish. Because if they want to build a family held or closely held business that they might hand over to the next generation, they need to really think strategically about what kind of outside capital that they bring in to be able to build that business. And in that particular case, that's where they're going to want to bring in out, if they need outside capital. One, the best thing is to bootstrap, to utilize internally generated profits to be able to build the business. But if they do need outside capital, it is in their best interest to have something that they can pay back. I try to avoid the word debt because there's a lot of preconceived notions of what debt is and is not and so forth. But the reality is that in security and something like debt or debt itself that can be paid back is really important for founders that may want to own and control their business long term. Now, if they're open and want to have partners that are owners in the business, by all means, great path to go down with angel investors, individual investors, and then to bring in venture capital partners. And I'm happy you brought that up, Brent, about control, because unfortunately, I've seen so many entrepreneurs where they go down the path of bringing in angel and venture dollars, and all of a sudden they realize that they're not in control anymore. And that's a really sad day because you can't really undo that. So it is important for founders to think through that early on.
Um, I did. So in your book, one of the things that you really point out is the fact that you should be thinking about your exit when you start. And you mentioned earlier about if you're in it for 20 years,
Yeah.
a lot of times you're not thinking about your exit. And most, my most recent experience was with a PE, a private equity
Yes.
company, and a lot of times their exit is 2 to 3 years. Their turnaround is. Talk a little bit about the importance of no matter when you expect, but that exit, just starting out with an exit, right? I think that's one of the things you talked about.
Very much so. It's very much to as Stephen Covey would say, start with the end in mind. But understanding what you're looking to achieve, and for entrepreneurs in particular, and I know Brent, like you've gone through this, and we know a number of people in entrepreneurs organization, but for a lot of entrepreneurs, it's a big question of like what next, because after they sell the business, then all the entrepreneurs I know, myself included, like they just can't sit still very long. So then they're on to the next thing. So it's really important to kind of think through what they want to achieve. So that exit planning is really important. And for some business owners, it doesn't need to be an exit plan being a sale of the business for cash. It may be that they truly become an owner and they're hiring all the people that can run the business day to day, and they can step away and just truly be an owner of the business. And so there's a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurs to fully unpack that. There's a number of good books that are written about exit planning, and there's a whole profession around exit planning. So there are consultants out there, and I just always highly encourage entrepreneurs to lean into that and think through that sooner rather than later. Um,
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'll talk a little bit about EO Minnesota, just the entrepreneurs organization in general. That it does wake you up to many concepts that I'll just use my own personal experience. That when I was younger, I didn't even think about those things. I didn't think about exit strategy when we started our newest business or the business we recently sold. I wasn't thinking about it when we started it, but at some point we were like, oh, maybe we should start doing it. And it took a lot of work to get all those things in place, finance and making sure your
exactly.
books are ready for an investor to look at, or even, for a sale. All those things are that you don't think about. And I think Entrepreneurs Organization gives you not necessarily the tools, but the access to the resources that you need to take that and go to the next level.
Very much so. I mean, we bring in a lot of wonderful speakers. We bring in a lot of content, but it's really up to the entrepreneur to lean in and unpack and dig into the things that are going to move the needle for them at that point in time. And so we're not a university. It's not some program that you have to go through. It's up to the entrepreneur to really identify and select and lean into the things that can help them at that point in time.
Yeah, and so you were the outgoing president of EO Minnesota. Tell us some of those experiences that you went through that were rewarding but also difficult.
Great question. So when we are all members of EO Minnesota today. We serve about 175 members of EO Minnesota, and we're part of a global organization that has over 20,000 members throughout the world. And so I joined as a member, and as I got involved, at one point somebody asked me to help out with some stuff, and I did. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed, joining the board and in meeting new people, as a healthy way to be able to get to know others and so forth. And then I ended up becoming president, which was completely unforeseen, not something I ever had on my to-do list or goals at all, but it just unfolded where I was leaning into things, asking questions, and one of the outgoing presidents years ago just said, would you be willing to serve the organization as president? And I thought about it, and I just reflected back. I said, if you feel like I can add value to the organization, and it needs what I can bring to the table, and so that's how that happened. And so I give that as background and context because for me, it has been one of the most rewarding experiences I have ever had is serving on the board, and then especially as president, because all of us as entrepreneurs we're all visionaries. And so a lot of people will talk about like leading leaders, but I don't even think that's a fair analogy. It's more like leading other visionaries, and it's a whole different ball of wax. And so for me, it was a very interesting journey. And so then your question was like, what was good and maybe not so good, but with that is inherent, challenges. Everybody's paying dues as a member. Nobody's being paid to be on the board. We're all volunteers and so forth. And so kind of thinking through and learning about, how to inspire others to take action and how to deal with things that are administrative or like a governance issue or things that people don't want to work on. Like how do you get through those things? And so there's definitely a grind to it. But at the end of the day, it was extremely rewarding because of the personal development that I had through the whole process. So whether it's EO or a Rotary Club or whatever nonprofit people serve, I would encourage people to get involved because it's more about your personal development than it is anything else. It's a unique challenge that's worth going through at some point in your career.
Yeah, yesterday you brought in Jack Daly, which is a
Yes.
world-renowned sales speaker. It's a speaker in general, and I think in our green room we said if he was going to talk about physics, we'd be enthralled by his physics talk.
Exactly.
One of the points he had right away was relentless. He had mindset, which I think
Yes.
is great. We don't have a lot of time to get into the mindset, but I think the mindset is the most important pivotal point for all of us. But that relentless energy that you demonstrated as president, talk a little bit about how entrepreneurs, like there's something secret inside that we don't know we have, but comes out as relentless energy.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Jack Daly talked about grit quite a bit yesterday, and that's absolutely true. But I love that phrase that you just used, relentless energy. And I think about that a lot because, as Jack talked about, I think about the mindset quite a bit. And at the end of the day, that relentless energy may feel like it's natural, but for a lot of entrepreneurs, myself included, it's not so natural. Like a lot of times, you got to like pump yourself up and get your head in the game, as I say to my kids as they're playing a sport. But it's really that mindset of taking action and doing the things that an entrepreneur needs to do to make sure their business is surviving, but then ultimately thriving. And it's all in the mind, as Jack Daly said many times yesterday. It's the 6 inches between your ears, and and that's what for me for the last 25 years it keeps coming back to that. We can talk about processes and all this stuff all day long, but none of it matters compared to what's going through that entrepreneur's head. And I even think about that, Brent, with the book. the title Breakout Valuation, but for me, breakout was a way to really signal like this mindset of abundance, and to have an entrepreneur to really think about abundance and how to be able to create value and why that is important. It's actually, the book is nothing about like getting a bigger check at an exit. It is about creating a valuable business, because that can help with a lot of things, whether it's attracting employees, better customers, so on and so forth. And maybe someday it ultimately is a bigger check at an exit. But there's a lot to that whole mindset of abundance that is really important, and I think does tie to that whole relentless energy, because relentless energy doesn't come without the right mindset.
Yeah, I think part of that mindset comes in self-reflection and always questioning
Yeah.
yourself. Like I'll just speak from my own experience. I have to always question myself and always keep learning and moving forward, or you get stuck in
Yeah.
some past. And talk a little bit about how your your interpretation of that is, and how that affects or how that applies to your business and your life.
Well, for me, it has been absolutely transformational. When I joined EO, everybody talked about you have to find ways to work on your business and not in your business. And that's what was going through my mind as you were, sharing your thoughts in your question. And I think it's really important for entrepreneurs, and I think everybody, but everybody's got to take a step back and really reflect. And I think 20 years ago, for me, that just sounded very foo-foo-y, and it's like something that sounded like a luxury, and like, yeah, maybe on a Saturday afternoon I'll, stare at the lake and think about my business for an hour. And it's like, no, like you need to get away for a week, if not 2 weeks, and like go on a retreat and really think about, meditate and strategize on what you're working on. And Jack talked a lot about that. And I've heard, I was listening to a podcast the other day about how important it was. Robin Sharma did the Power Series for EO, and Robin Sharma was talking about how sleep is critical, but it's really important to like take the time to reflect and meditate on everything you're doing, because when you're in action, you got to go into action hard, and you got to have that energy reserved as an entrepreneur. But you can't do that, for 40 hours a week, or let alone 100 hours a week. Like that's all just, that's pure myth and made up. Like somebody can't go hard 100 hours a week. They just can't. They can definitely like meditate and, be reserving energy and go hard at a certain period, but you can't go hard all the time, because your health is going to, you're going to implode doing that. And so, yeah, I love how you're where you're going with all this, but it's so important for entrepreneurs to reflect and to think about what they're doing, where they're going, because for me, that's where it's really unlocked value for all my work with Hill Capital and EO, and the things that I'm touching is when I've been able to take a deep breath and to take time away to, and that's why I love skiing and stuff like that, because it's the time to refill the batteries. So
I'll share a moment of transparency and be vulnerable, but like as just gone through my moderator training, we're not supposed to use the word vulnerable anymore. We use transparency.
I like it.
uh, Oftentimes I bring a notebook to church, a little field notes notebook, and during the sermon, not that I'm zoning out, but my mind always is connecting, let's say, spiritual things with your business. And I believe that there's a
Yes.
connection in our lives. Our lives are not, we're not buckets that are not connected. We are whole people, that everything moves from one part to the other, your personal, your business, it's all interconnected. And whoever says that you can turn off something is not completely true. Anyways, I'll take notes
Yes,
during
I agree.
sermons, and I'll actually think about business stuff. It's horribly embarrassing, but um, uh, I will do that. And it is a time when you're disconnected from all your electronics, that it's unique in the time where somebody's speaking to you about a topic and you're not going to do that. But the only reason I bring it up, it's an illustration of reflection, and a time that you're away, that you can think about the way your life is, And for me, anyways, I think about how can I apply that in my business life and my personal life, and it's a good reflection point.
I completely agree, very much so. And I think those, for me, it's um, what what came to mind for me is that my best insights and inspirations and things that have been helpful for my business are was is never really been in the office. It's when I've been out for a walk a lot of times, or I'm downhill skiing or other things, and all of a sudden, like, it will open up a whole new series of thoughts on how to connect the dots on things, and that's really really powerful. And I just reread the book Mastery by Robert Greene, and he actually talks a lot about that. That why multidisciplinary approach and using other things to be able to think through the what you're working on today is very very important. So I love it, Brent. I'm there with you. I can't sit too still in a sermon anyways these days. So it's
Okay, I want to shift gears a little bit because you alluded to a new book you're looking at, and you talked about Jack Daly a little bit. To tell us a little bit about what
yes.
you're tell us about what you're working on next.
So in the book Breakout Valuation, I talk about the 9 components to being able to understand and track progress around uh, creating value, and one of them's around vision. And then I talk about in the book 19 real drivers of value, and the first one is magnetic vision, and that is the one that entrepreneurs have leaned into the most. And so I've started the process of writing the next book to discuss that and to go into that to more detail, because the nice thing is magnetic vision can apply to every business. All 19 of the real drivers of value in the book that I talk about, it applies to most, but not all. But magnetic vision definitely is something that is important for all entrepreneurs. And the idea is to have a vision of where you're going, but the key is that you have to be able to articulate as an entrepreneur and to bring people to your vision. And so that's what makes it attractive, thus magnetic. And being able to build that community around you as an entrepreneur and as your business to support you in where you're going and growing. And I've been doing that with my own business, Hill Capital Corporation. We're doing it to a degree in EO, but as I've learned and thought about this over the last several years, I want to really lean into this, because there are some other books around vision. People talk about why it's important, but I'm going to really lean in and give a number of case studies around why a magnetic vision can help truly build value for a business, no matter who you are or where you're at in your entrepreneurial
Yeah, I
journey.
think yesterday Jack talked a lot about how there has to be a common vision with all your team, and especially this playbook idea,
Yes.
which apparently most people don't have. And yeah, um, I,
Yeah.
I think
So
he
I
said
don't feel bad.
4% of the companies actually have a playbook. Is that the right stat that I got?
Yeah, he had said that on the sales
Yeah,
playbook.
and I would say
So
that most companies don't have a playbook at all, regardless of that.
yeah,
One thing you mentioned, and this is I'm certainly guilty of this, is that you have your HR department write your your employee manual.
and it sits on a shelf and nobody looks on it unless there's a crisis. So yeah.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about how that affects you and what you're doing.
uh, on
Yeah, I
the
mean, just
playbook,
having that
or
that
what affects?
the vision is great, and then getting in it, but how do you communicate to that
Yeah.
your team? Playbooks one way, constant meetings, or what is it that, how do you get that vision to, you talked about getting it to the people you're selling to, but I think more importantly, getting it to your team, right?
Well, what I think about is, the word you just talked about with transparency. And what I've been doing personally, and what I'm going to talk about more about in the book, is to just be very open and transparent wherever possible. Is to be sharing that vision uh, within the natural course of conversation and communications, wherever they may be. I What the challenges that a lot of entrepreneurs face is that they feel this need to, like, hold on to things really tightly. And I think it gets really dangerous when they say, well, I'm going to only share this vision with my shareholders or key employees or whatever the case may be. And that's where it's not magnetic in the true sense of the word, because to truly be magnetic is to really share it out there. A magnet, you can't really cut off a part of a magnet. It's attracting from all angles. And I think that's really important for an entrepreneur to kind of think through that concept, is to share that magnetic vision wherever possible, because you never know what is going to come to you or to the business that can help propel it forward. And for me, what has always been fascinating is that throughout my 30-year career so far, the people I always thought like could be like super helpful were not the people that actually move the needle. It's the people that came out of left field because I was sharing something. All of a sudden they said, "Oh, let me introduce you to so and so," and all of a sudden it was a new client or a new deal or whatever the case may be, and it just opened up a whole new world. And so I have really leaned into the idea of transparency and to get a lot more comfortable sharing things that I would never have dreamed of sharing 20 years ago, and being able to share where I want to go with Hill Capital and what I want to do and how I'm going to get there, because you never know where somebody is going to hear that and see that and be able to be helpful to making that a reality. And so that's how I think about articulating it. Is I think people need to think about the default being share it far and wide as much as possible, and don't hold it close, because that's where I think people go wrong. They think that they've been communicating it, and they really haven't.
That's funny that my wife says that all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Right.
A lot
Yeah,
of personal
exactly.
lessons here too. It is the same thing, but that I do.
Right.
Transparency helps with a lot of things. So
One of the things that he brought up yesterday that resonated with me was pity party, and how oftentimes we as entrepreneurs get caught up in our own pity when something happens. And the next part to that was
yeah,
figure it out. And he used a lot of F words and a lot of other expletives that added to or enhanced on that. Just figure it out.
yes,
I don't want to dwell on pity party, but that figure it out part, I think, is one of the most important lessons that anybody can take away from any entrepreneurial
yeah.
journey, and learning and moving forward. Always talk about how the importance of not only just always figuring it out, but being I'll use the word relentless again in finding that new path and growing not for the sake of growing, but growing to be relevant in this time.
Yeah, very much so. And, we all have bad things happen to us. And that's why I've come to love Jack, because, you think the guy is superhuman, then all of a sudden you peppers in that, just got over cancer and he's 75 years old and his wife passed away. And it's like, like every human being goes through a lot of challenges. And that's very true with business. When we talk with our portfolio companies, we say, when there's an issue, boom, boom, boom. Not if there's an issue. Like I guarantee you, every business, no matter how sparkly they look on the front end, they have major issues. And we have one happening with us at Hill Capital right now. We have a portfolio company that is in a very distressed situation, and being transparent and going to all of our stakeholders and our ambassadors and pulling the community around, like, hey, how can we think about this, and so on and so forth. And I share that. I share that with you because for me, it's that whole like turn lemons into lemonade. Like how do you find a silver lining? You could throw a lot of different words and analogies at this, but at the end of the day, you get that gut punch and you got a little pity party, and it's like, oh my gosh, and I just want to like give up, and why do I do this? And I should just go get a real job or whatever the case may be, or the things that cycle through entrepreneurs' heads when times get tough. But what I have come to find and what I'm leaning into, Brent, is that growth only happens through discomfort. You cannot, by definition, you cannot have growth without massive discomfort. That's the only time you grow. And so now when I have uncomfortable situations like this company that's distressed, it's like, What can I build and to learn from? Where can there be things that we can do? So for us, for Hill Capital, it's like, oh, well, we learned that this process would be better. We could update things over here and da da da. And we could let our other portfolio companies know about how to think about these things so this doesn't happen to them. And as I start to pull out all these things that we've learned, and I'm like, that's where the value is, right? That's the value because, in 30 years from now, Hill Capital, this is going to be the story, the bit of the mythology of like when we had these issues and stuff happened to companies, we made these decisions to learn from it and to build and grow. And now we've got our IP or our internal processes and how to think about things as the foundational to what allows us to be very successful long term. So that's what I've been using as mindset to like keep myself in the game and pump myself up is like when I face tough times, like, okay, somewhere here, this is actually going to be good news. It doesn't feel that way. It feels impossible today, but I got to take this as like, this is going to be someday I'm going to look back and say, this is awesome because this is what led us to do this, to this, to this. And it was the cause of our growth long term. So, it's a big topic, and I'm grateful that you bring that up, Brent, because it's important for entrepreneurs to think about that they get out of that pity party as Jack talked about.
So before let's just say the first step is that people should read your book, Breakout Valuation. What is the first thing they should take as an action? And one thing I like about EO is we leave with a lot of action items. What would be the first thing if and we're not supposed to give advice, but in your experience, what would be a new a business owner who's at the point of even trying to get capital, or what is it that first step they should take?
For me, the first step is really around, I think really plays into everything we just talked about, but that first step is really around mindset. And I talk about this in the book, is to really think through and unpack, like, how do they perceive things? And is it real or is it an illusion? And what are the things that they need to know and to understand? And so it's really taking that step back and to come at things with the curiosity of a child. And that's what I talk about in the book, is to bring out that inner 4-year-old and ask a whole lot of questions. Because that's where entrepreneurs really get screwed. And I'm tired of seeing entrepreneurs get screwed out of their businesses or taken advantage of, because they were afraid to ask the simple questions because they felt like they should know something. Like they feel like they should know something about like raising capital or what their business should be worth and all that type of stuff, because all these players that provide capital, buy businesses, they love to throw around acronyms and big words, and they love to scare business owners into just like handing over their very valuable business for peanuts. And so it's really important for entrepreneurs to take a step back and to unleash that inner 4-year-old, ask simple questions, learn, and to really reflect back at like, do they really know something or is it an illusion? Do they have an opinion around equity or debt because of what they had read somewhere or heard from somewhere, and they really know that it's really factual? And so that's where I would encourage people to kind of start with that reflection as step one, is to go into it with that
that's
open
such a great
mindset.
lesson, and it's so hard. I mean, I'll say from my own experience that if you think you're an expert in some field, the hardest thing is to start asking questions about that field as though you're not an expert, because you're perceived to the other person as not being smart enough. And I'll close this out with my final little experience share in the subject.
Yeah.
About 15 years ago, I wanted to be a trainer for this software company called Magento, and I thought that I knew everything. And I got on this call with this guy from Ukraine who was like the smartest guy in the world, and he says, the first question, how much do you know about Magento? And I said, I think I know about 99%. And he started laughing. And then he went in to ask me 5 questions, of which I knew nothing about. And
Wow. There's
a
a dose
said,
of humble
I am
pudding.
so embarrassed that you have humbled me to the lowest level that I could possibly be, and it really invigorated me to step up my game. Because there is that imposter syndrome, but there's also the imposter syndrome where you think you know something more, right?
Well, and that's where, I mean, Robert Greene touched upon this in that book Mastery, but it's like, the real masters get to a point where they just acknowledge they never know, and they're constantly curious and always building and learning. Because that's why I've kind of gotten away from the whole phrase expert, because I think it's super dangerous, because no one can be an expert, especially in today's world where there's so much information. But I'm the same way, Brent. Like for finance and so forth, like I am definitely beyond the in the top 1%. Like this has been my whole life. I get it. I have the chartered financial analyst designation, so on and so forth. But there's always something new, different, better information. You can never feel like quite an expert. And for me, the humble pudding was in EO when I went to Money Day for Accelerator 12 years ago. And I went in there with an air of attitude of like, well, I know all this stuff. I'll just sit in the back and get some real work done. And Greg Crabtree talks. And Greg's up there talking about, his work and what he's doing and so forth. And I'm like, oh boy. Like, and it just hit me. That's the day when I realized I hate accounting and I love finance. And I thought I knew accounting and all that type of stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm the cobbler's kid. Like, and so that for me, that's why I have deep respect for EO, and just it's been a great personal journey as well. So yeah, never stop learning.
So never stop learning. We're going to have to leave it there. We've gone through our 15 minutes of time here.
Yeah.
Patrick, as we close out, I give everybody a chance to do a shameless plug. What would you like to plug today?
Well, I don't have any big shameless plug. I will just say that I am open to connecting with everyone. If anybody wants to have a conversation around capital or entrepreneurship, easily accessible, you can find me on LinkedIn. Just shoot me a note that you heard or learned to reach out to me from this podcast, because I get a lot of requests. But otherwise, it's Patrick, my full first name, Patrick at hillcapitalcorp.com. Patrick at hillcapitalcorp.com, and I'm happy to connect and to collaborate or help you find capital or whatever you need as an entrepreneur in their journey. So I'm very grateful for the time here, Brent, and happy to help.
Can I do a one for you? Because I know you do the 1 million cups, and that was,
sure.
You invited me to one of those events, and it was very inspirational.
Yes. Well, 1 million cups is every Wednesday. Actually, I'm drinking on my 1 million cups cup. And so every Wednesday, 9 a.m., we meet in Eden Prairie, Minnesota, but there's 200 chapters throughout the United States. And it's free, open to the public. We serve coffee, and it's just a volunteer-led thing where we have one or two entrepreneurs come and share their story. So I just help, found the local group here. But I love 1 million cups. It's just a very safe place, and there's no RSVPs, there's no membership list, there's no dues. It's just, get together and hear from an entrepreneur and
perfect.
Have a cup of coffee.
A great ending note.
So, yep.
Patrick Donohue, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you for all you do for entrepreneurs.
Uncharted Entrepreneurship is a production of Content Basis LLC. Copyright 2023. You can find more award-winning content at contentbasis.io. And that wraps up the latest edition of Uncharted Entrepreneurship. Bold tales from entrepreneurial trailblazers. I'm your host, Brent Peterson, signing off after an incredible fireside chat with one of our intrepid trailblazing guests. Their first-hand perspective on conquering the unexplored wilds of business is just a taste of the rare wisdom you'll discover from pioneering entrepreneurs on this show. I also invite you to join me each week for insider commentary on the startup scene and digital marketing landscape on my Talk Commerce podcast. You can find Talk Commerce wherever you download podcasts or go to talk-commerce.com. I'd be grateful if you left a review and rating for Uncharted Entrepreneurship to help more bold founders find their way to game-changing insights that empower ventures to transform communities. This is your host, Brent Peterson, signing off for now. I'll see you around the virtual campfire next episode as we embark on another adventure into the great entrepreneurial unknown.